Welcome to The Critique. Today we are examining a script for a POV YouTube video taking the viewer on an interactive, superluminal journey through the Carina Nebula. Let's dive right into the feedback.
Yeah, the source material establishes a really strong, awe-inspiring premise and clearly understands its subject matter. But to maximize the reader's experience, we really need to focus on heightening the immersion of this interactive format.
Absolutely. So to create a truly immersive journey, we first have to look at how the listener is physically navigated through the space.
Right, the structure and flow of that physical movement.
Yeah, exactly. So let me quickly summarize the flight path outlined in the material. The script has us jumping from Earth to Carina, right? And we're flying among these massive pillars of gas.
Which is a great visual.
It is. But then suddenly it asks the viewer to zoom way, way out to see the entire Milky Way and Andromeda.
Just out of nowhere.
Right, out of nowhere. And then, almost immediately, it tells the viewer to dive all the way back down into Eta Carinae. It's kind of like watching a movie where the director rapidly cuts from a microscopic view of a leaf right up to a satellite view of the Earth, and then instantly back down to the leaf.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. It's jarring.
But I have to ask, is this jarring shift just a necessary evil to convey the sheer scale of the universe? Like, don't space documentaries do that kind of stuff all the time?
The narrative pacing stumbles when shifting rapidly from extreme close-ups of specific stellar phenomena to the macro scale of the entire galaxy and back again.
So it's the speed of the shift that's the issue?
Yeah, the weakness here is pulling the viewer out of the Carina Nebula, showing them the entire Milky Way and Andromeda 2.5 million light-years away, and then abruptly commanding them to recenter their suit and dive back into Carina. It breaks the immersive POV illusion.
I see. Because they were just getting invested in the nebula.
Exactly. It completely undercuts the emotional momentum that's building toward the Eta Carinae encounter. You rip them out, and the brain just kind of gives up trying to measure the awe.
It just turns into abstract numbers at that point.
Right. So the suggestion is to reorder the journey to follow a continuous logical spatial progression, either consistently moving outside in or inside out.
Okay, so picking a direction and sticking to it.
Yeah, so the sense of scale builds naturally without causing that spatial whiplash.
What are some concrete examples of how the writer could actually structure that progression?
Well, there are a few ways to solve this. One approach is to start with the macro-galactic view as the jump sequence alignment, showing Andromeda and the Milky Way first.
Oh, like when they first leave Earth.
Exactly. You see the big picture first, then zoom into Carina, and finally dive deep into the Homunculus Nebula as the big climax.
That makes sense. Like falling into a well. What's the other option?
Alternatively, you could save the massive galactic zoom out for the very end. Use the view of Andromeda as this grand philosophical closing thought before returning to Earth.
Ah, I like that. Both of those options maintain the physical momentum of the viewer, instead of just bouncing them around like a ping pong ball.
Right. It keeps the narrative grounded in a physical reality.
So, moving on to audience agency. Now that the physical flight path is streamlined, we really need to address who is actually flying the suit.
Yeah, the pilot. Or the supposed pilot.
Right, because the material explicitly tells the viewer they have control, but the execution doesn't quite support that promise.
Not at all.
In the opening instructions for Mission Control, it literally says, you are in full manual override and you can change your speed or drop out of the jump whenever you want.
Which is an amazing hook.
It is. But let me push back a little. As I understand it, the argument is that giving the user control is just a fun framing device to hook them in the first place. Does it really matter if it isn't mentioned again once they're inside the nebula?
The interactive framing device introduced in the opening is abandoned, leaving the audience's role in the journey feeling passive.
So you're saying the weakness is that the viewer becomes a passenger?
Exactly. After explicitly telling the viewer they have full manual override, the rest of the script just ignores this agency. The viewer is essentially railroaded through a fixed tour.
Like they're on a bus.
Right. They are told what they're seeing without ever being prompted to act. It makes the manual override concept feel like a forgotten gimmick, rather than a core engagement tool.
I guess if you hand someone the keys to a spaceship, you can't just take them right back and put the ship on autopilot.
Exactly. If you strip that agency away, the immersion collapses entirely. So the suggestion here is to integrate the suit control mechanic directly into the descriptive transitions.
Okay, to maintain the illusion of an interactive, pilot-driven experience throughout the entire journey.
Yes, keeping their hands on the metaphorical steering wheel.
But how do we do that without making the script sound like a dry technical manual? Give me some concrete examples.
Sure. So instead of simply saying, hey, we're going to swing closer to this system.
Which sounds very passive.
Right. Mission Control could instead say, Engage your suit's thermal shielding and reroute thrusters to swing closer to that blinding beacon.
Oh, wow. That feels completely different.
Yeah, or like when entering the thick gas clouds, prompt the user with something like, calibrate your visor to pierce the dust clouds. Notice how the thin gas stretches for light years.
These are just a few ways to keep the user engaged.
It turns passive observation into an active discovery. I really love that.
The verbs like engage and calibrate make you feel like you're actually surviving in space.
It bridges the gap between a video game interface and a nature documentary.
Which leads perfectly into tone and immersion. Because building on that idea of active piloting, if the viewer is physically flying close to an unstable star system, the language really needs to reflect the reality of that dangerous environment.
Absolutely. The tone has to match the hazard.
So let's look closely at the section discussing Eta Carinae. The material accurately summarizes the facts here. It's a binary system over 100 times the mass of our sun, shining millions of times brighter, and expected to explode as a supernova.
It's a terrifying and beautiful system.
It really is. But playing devil's advocate again, I can see what the writer is going for here. Couldn't one argue that the audience clicked on this specifically to learn these exact textbook facts?
Sure, they want to learn.
Right. So is there a risk that focusing too much on the danger or the survival aspect might overshadow the educational value?
The script occasionally dilutes the visceral thrill of exploring an unstable stellar environment by defaulting to detached textbook-style exposition.
So the weakness is that it sounds like a lecture in the middle of a war zone.
Yes. When describing Eta Carinae's violent eruptions, the language phrases like expected to explode as titanic supernovas or pausing to say to put their scale into perspective, it just sounds like a classroom lecture.
It totally breaks the live mission format.
Exactly. It doesn't sound like mission control talking to a lone pilot flying through a hazardous, radiation-soaked cosmic shroud.
If you're dodging debris, mission control isn't going to pause and say, now to put their scale into perspective, listener.
Right, it shatters the fourth wall.
So how do we fix that? What's the suggestion?
The suggestion is to blend the educational scientific facts directly into the sensory in-universe mission telemetry.
Okay, so you don't lose the facts.
No, you heighten the immediate stakes while still delivering the educational payload. You just change the delivery mechanism.
Can you give me some concrete examples of what that live telemetry sounds like?
Of course. So instead of pausing to explain mass and brightness mathematically, you frame it as a live sensory reading. For example, warning, telemetry is spiking. You're approaching a system packing over 100 times the mass of our sun. Your suit is currently deflecting radiation from an unstable binary, shedding gas at incredible rates.
Oh, that is so much better. It delivers the exact same data, the mass, the binary nature, the instability, but maintains the illusion of an active, dangerous spaceflight.
Yeah, it takes a passive history lesson and turns it into a clear and present dynamic threat.
It proves that the educational content and the narrative immersion aren't mutually exclusive. You can learn about the universe while feeling like you're trying to survive it.
Exactly. When you merge them, learning becomes an adventure.
Well, stepping back to look at the big picture of this critique, we've identified 3 really crucial high-level adjustments needed to elevate this material. First, reorder the spatial transitions to avoid that scale whiplash and build a natural progression.
Right. Moving continuously inward or outward so the audience isn't bouncing around the galaxy.
Exact. Second, weave the manual override mechanic into the scene transitions to keep the audience feeling active.
Give them something to do, like calibrating the visor.
Yeah, don't just leave them as passive tourists. And third, deliver the scientific facts as live in-universe telemetry rather than detached textbook exposition.
Keep the stakes high and the danger real.
Absolutely. And honestly, the underlying concept here is highly engaging. We'd love to invite the writer to implement these actionable suggestions and submit the revised work back in for another critique.
Yeah, the raw material is fantastic. Grounding it in this immersive framework will just make it incredible.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next critique.